Since the dawn of the 21st century, scientific discovery has rushed forward at lightning speed. Genetics, physics, computerized technology, robotics, virtual reality. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert as they uncover the truths behind this ultimate scientific deception. Welcome to Sci Friday.
From the International Symposium on Archaeology in the Bible, it's time for Welcome to Sci Friday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we're under very different circumstances recording this particular episode because, again, we are in the lobby of a hotel here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and there are lots and lots of things going on around us. This seemed like the most interesting background, but more than that, to tell you, we are at a beautiful hotel that ironically is a ziggurat.
Yes, it's the Marriott Pyramid North in Albuquerque.
Only it's not a pyramid, it's actually a stepped pyramid. It's a ziggurat.
Yeah, and so what an appropriate place to hold a conference on biblical archaeology, because it's the archaeology of the lands of the Bible that's been discussed this weekend. This conference is put on by the School of Archaeology at Veritas International University here in Albuquerque, Trinity Southwest University.
In fact, we got to go over to their headquarters, take a look around, and we found this amazing timeline of biblical history all along the wall, inscribed on acrylic so that it was easy to read and in big, bold letters. And we also bought our own miniature version of it.
Yes, the museum that they have there, many of the artifacts are reproductions, but they're there to educate people who come by, students who are studying archaeology at Trinity Southwest. But they say that they often have Bible classes, Sunday schools and Bible studies will come by and take a look at these artifacts, which represent many of the important things from daily life, but also the important records that were left behind by the cultures around the ancient Israelites.
I think one of my favorite interviews is the one you're going to be watching today, because we were really privileged. We've talked to others about Tel al-Hammam, which if you've been to Jordan with us, you've seen us pointed out that little hillock off to the sort of the 1 o'clock position?
Roughly, yeah. As you're looking from Mount Nebo towards Jericho, you can see the Dead Sea at about the 10 o'clock position. Jericho's straight ahead. And then off to the right, just 1-2 o'clock position, is a little hill that extends over the valley where the Jordan River flows and has flowed.
It flew.
Roll, Jordan, roll. Has been for many, many thousands of years. And in the days of Abraham and Lot, it was as the Bible describes it, a well-watered plain. So agriculture was a feature there in the southern Jordan Valley, and that's what allowed Tal el-Hammam, or ancient Sodom, to thrive. It was continuously occupied from about 4000 BC, which is the middle of the Chalcolithic period, or the Copper Age, down to the time of its destruction, which, according to the team led by Dr. Stephen Collins, who, as Sharon mentioned, will be featured in this week and next week's interviews. And they put that roughly 1750 BC, give or take a century or so. So right in the wheelhouse of where some would put the lives of Abraham and Lot. So it was watered by a perennial stream, which, of course, if you've ever been to Jordan or even just looked at pictures of Jordan, Jordan in movies will often stand in for the surface of Mars. That's how dry it is.
But very red, especially down near Wadi Rum.
Right. And but unlike many other places in the Levant, especially when you get south of the Sea of Galilee, very dry, except for this stream that flows right past that city. In fact, Jordan, the country, has dammed it up, and they've got a small lagoon. What's the word I'm looking for there? A
reservoir?
Reservoir. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. A reservoir. Water is very, very precious in Jordan. Here in the United States, we're so used to getting free water when we go to restaurants. You don't get free water in Jordan. You pay for the water.
You buy water, and you don't dare drink
the water from the tap. Yeah. But it was fascinating. Some of the things that we learned, and we can't share, just as with last year's conference, we can't share everything that we heard this weekend because not all of it has been published yet. So
no filming was allowed, no photos were allowed.
Many of the scholars who present at these conferences will only do so because they know that the people attending have agreed not to share anything, take pictures of their slides or share anything outside of the conference. We can talk a little bit about some of the things that have been published. It was really interesting seeing these professional archaeologists who, like the archaeologists of the 19th century, and you've written some.
Sorry, just touch this. I just want to make sure that it's not being covered. I like my little earpiece.
Yeah. So again, this is the road gear that we're using. As you've written in your Red Wing Saga series, you've included a number of historical characters, one of them being Sir Charles Warren,
yes,
who found the stela inside the temple on the summit of Mount Hermon. But he was just one of many sent by the Palestine Exploration Fund into Israel back then, and they used the Bible as a guide in the field.
Oh, absolutely. By the way, Sir Charles Warren also discovered the Mesha stone.
Yes.
And that was discussed back and forth a few times over this conference as well.
One of the presentations, and I'm not going to pronounce the scholar's name correctly, Dr. Lawrence Mikityuk, I think.
Mikityuk.
I think that's right. He presented by remotely. He wasn't able to travel, but he showed how 55 people mentioned in the Bible, 55 people mentioned in the Bible have been documented in texts outside of the Bible. And he used some very stringent criteria. It wasn't just, oh yeah, we found the name somewhere else. It had to match details in the Bible, that they were the son of so-and-so in both texts, or that the job was the same. For example, scribes and servants working for Hezekiah was one. But foreign kings, other personages, it was really fascinating because we have raised, sadly, we're being raised in a world that treats the Bible as a collection of myths and fairy tales. And Dr. Mikityuk, forgive me, sir, for not remembering the correct pronunciation, that just isn't true. The Bible is not a historical book mainly, that's not its main purpose, but the history in it is accurate.
It is so accurate, and it is not only a religious book, it's an inspirational book. It had one author, the Holy Spirit, through mankind, through our pens, through the pens of others, but we also see enough reference points in there that we can find those historical individuals. We can indicate that this passage is correct. So if you can trust the history of it, can we not also trust the implications spiritually of it? Because all of it, Genesis to Revelation, is about a long spiritual war that began before the Garden of Eden.
Right. Some of the texts external to the Bible that are being used now to corroborate the historical evidence in the Bible include texts from Egypt. If you've been watching Sci Friday for any length of time, you'll have seen our recent programs with Dr. Doug Petrovich about the author of Origins of the Hebrews and the World's Oldest Alphabet. But others, like Dr. James Hoffmeyer, who presented here this weekend, talking about the Egyptian texts and how they are helping us narrow down things like when and where the Exodus took place. There's still a debate about that. One of the books we're coming home with presents 5 different views of the Exodus. Again,
well, the old joke is if you have 4 archaeologists, you have 5 or 6 views.
Right. And Dr. Brian Janeway, who's a friend of Doug Petrovich's, who presented on a kingdom located in what is now southern Turkey and northern Syria called Palestine. And if that sounds like Palestine, yes, you're right. Scholars just within the last 10 years or so are coming to realize that there was a kingdom in the north of people who came from the Aegean, from the Greek world, who were probably cousins to the Philistines who settled in the south around Gaza and Ashdod and Ekron and Gath.
And though that information is backed up genetically, because many of the people that we call Philistines today are actually Aegean genetically.
Yeah. So a lot of fascinating information here, and we were just honored to be a part of it. But one of the most fascinating discussions, and we're going to come to this in just a moment, was with the gentleman who's led the dig at Tal El Hammam for the last 16 years now, Dr. Stephen Collins, and we'll come back with that interview when Sci Friday continues. Who would have thought just a few years ago we'd find ourselves in a world where refusing an experimental medicine could keep you from traveling, going to the store, or even cost you your job? Actually, we did. My novel, The God Conspiracy, was published last year when it suddenly became much more relevant than it had been when I started writing it more than 15 years ago. And I drew on characters and ideas developed by Sharon a few years earlier for her novel, The Armageddon Strain. We'd like to make The God Conspiracy available to you as part of our special offer during the month of August. It's a fast-moving story of people, ordinary people, who find themselves in circumstances beyond their control, and the only ones who really understand what's going on are those who see that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. During the month of August, we'll send you The God Conspiracy and 12 hours of video teachings. Our 2 DVD sets, Unmasking the Ancient Gods and This Is War. 4 discs in all, 12 hours of video teachings. A retail value altogether of $120 for just $35 plus shipping and handling. This offer is only available during the month of August and only at our store. Available online at gilberthouse.org. Welcome back to Sci Friday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are so excited about being here in Albuquerque. You can be on the ground and study archaeology with us in the field in Israel and in Jordan. Just sign up to go with us to Israel in March of 2023. Go to gilberthouse.org and you'll find a link there in the menu bar that says Travel with Us or Travel with the Gilberts. Everything you need to know is right there.
Absolutely. So you get to see these places where these discoveries are being made. It's very, very exciting. And again, one of the most exciting and I think stunning discoveries of the last century, but certainly within the last 25 years, is what's been happening at Tal El Hammam. And we had the honor, privilege, and blessing of talking to the director of the School of Archaeology for Veritas International University and the chief archaeologist of Tal El Hammam, Dr. Stephen Collins. We're here in the Hospitality Suite at the International Symposium for Archaeology and the Bible. Dr. Collins, we really appreciate you putting this together. First, why did you bring back this conference? This is the second year that it's been back after a hiatus of some years.
Yeah, almost 15 years. Yeah, it was a long time. Well, we used to do it in the wintertime because January was the deadest month of the year after the holidays, and so we used to have it then. Back from 2001 to 2005, I believe. And it just so happens that in 2005, we also started the Tal El Hammam excavation, and which had to be in that winter framework because the Jordan Valley, where the excavation is located, is way too hot. Any other time of the year.
We've been there in May. We can attest to that.
So it's pretty warm. So we just had to sacrifice the symposium, and we didn't realize it was going to disappear for that many years, but we were just so busy. And so we've done 15 seasons at the Tal El Hammam site since then, since we laid it down. But then, by 15 seasons, you kind of figure things out. It's not as intense and overwhelming as it used to be. Since all of our equipment and all my clothes and all of everything we need for the dig is in Jordan already, it stays there. So life got a little bit easier, and we decided. And we originally did the symposium because we wanted our students to interact with the best scholars in the world of archaeology and biblical archaeology. So, but we thought, we got to bring all these people in. Why don't we open it to the public and charge some money so we can help defray the expenses of the symposium? So we did that, and now we're back. So we decided last year we're going to do it. In fact, it was Gary Byers, my assistant director at Tal Hammam Dig, who said, we really ought to bring that back for our students. We really need to do that again. So we decided to do it. We had a really good symposium last fall, in last September, and then we asked everybody to raise their hand last year.
Yeah.
If we do it next year, will you come back? Of course, just about everybody raised their hand. Well, everybody was expecting it to be in September, but after COVID, all the hotels got greedy, I think, and they decided to raise their prices way up to sort of make up for lost time. And boy, September was the high season here in Albuquerque, and but August still was kind of lagging at the end of the low season because kids are going back to school, people aren't traveling as much. So we decided, we just can't do it in September. It's just too expensive, and we can't. You can only charge so much for for a symposium or a conference. So we decided we'll do it in August, and I think we lost quite a few people, but we still have a good group this year, but not as many as last year.
Yeah, we're among those who raised our hands,
Yeah.
and we're happy to be back
Yeah,
again.
well, we're
this year.
glad you're back because some people raise their hands and
Couldn't make
then
it.
they wind up not being able to make it.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about some of the subjects covered here, but I want to just touch for a bit on the work that you've been doing at Tal El Hammam. We were made aware of it a few years back when it first attracted some news after Dr. Philip Sylvia, your director of scientific analysis there, presented at a conference in the fall of 2018, I believe. Perfect timing for us because then in the spring of 2019, from Mount Nebo, we were able to point to that little hill extending into the Jordan Valley and say, look, there it is. What was it that made you look at that site, overlooking the Jordan River, the plains of Moab, as a potential dig site?
Well, the site of Sodom and the cities of the plain, of course, had long been controversial. Babadra and Numeira and some other sites near the south end of the Dead Sea had always been more or less lumped together as the traditional cities of the plain. There were some severe problems with that I was particularly unaware of. And other scholars had to do a lot of bending and massaging of the historical record to make that happen. But I was even on a TV documentary back in the early 1990s talking about Babadra and the location of the south end of the Dead Sea as Sodom and all of that. So, I mean, I was just going along with the conventional wisdom at the time. And then about 1996, I was leading a tour, and we were going to include Jordan. And so we had gone all the way through Israel. We're way down at Eilat, and we're going to cross over at Aqaba, and we're going to come back up and go to eventually go to Petra, and then go over to Babadra, Sodom. So I had that on my itinerary. So at the hotel over in Israel before we crossed over, I got the Bible out just to kind of read and brush up on it. And as I read through it, I got to the end of it, and I thought, wait a minute. I didn't see anything in there that would locate Sodom toward the south into the Dead Sea. And so I read it again. I read it again 2 or 3 more times that night, so at least 4 times. And when I got through, I said, not only is there nothing in the entire stretch of the Sodom narratives that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea, every indicator I see in there would locate it north and east of the Dead Sea. And because the Bible was very clear that Lot looked down and saw the cities of the plain, saw the Kikar, the circle of the Jordan, and the cities of the Kikar, and that he traveled there from well north of Jerusalem, above Jericho in the highlands at Bethel and Ai, where Lot and Abraham were stationed at the time. It says he lifted up his eyes from that location and then traveled eastward and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. Well, everything about that, and the Bible clearly said that the Jordan, and these were the cities of the Kikar, of the Jordan, and the Bible is very clear that the Jordan River, the descending, which Jordan means descending of the fresh water, ends at the Bay of the Dead Sea, at the mouth of the Jordan, below Pisgah, which is Nebo. Well, that's all north of the Dead Sea. So it's pretty clear if you know all the geography. And so I thought, that bugs me. I've been taking people to the wrong site, and so is everybody else. So what are we going to do about this? Well, nothing actually, because that very year we started our excavation with Gary and I and Bryant Wood and others up at Khirbet el-Maqader, which was also about 12 miles north of Jerusalem, up in the highlands, not far from Bethel and Ai. So I just kind of logged it in the back of my head. It bothered me that so many people had flipped the geography upside down, but I didn't have time to do anything about it because we were just starting an excavation. I didn't need a project, didn't need a study to do. So I laid it down. Well, about 6 years later, about 2000, got a little dicey in the West Bank, as you recall. And, we had going back and forth to the dig, we had a few rocks thrown at the bus and things like that. And so we decided to shut the dig down, at least temporarily. And so after that, in the winter of 2000, 2001, now as an archaeologist, I'm thinking, oh, we don't have a project to go to. We just shut the dig down. What are we going to do? So I thought, that Sodom conundrum, I've got to dive into that. A lot of times when I do these kinds of research, I don't really want to see what other people think. Don't care. Because it seemed like in this case, especially, everybody else was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really don't want to listen anymore to what anybody else had to say. I'm going to go back to the Hebrew text, and I'm going to work it word for word, phrase for phrase, sentence for sentence, and let's see what it really says, and let's see what it doesn't say. And so I did that. And in fact, what I did was I put in, because I knew if I didn't put in to read a paper, at least at NEAS, Near East Archaeological Society meeting in the fall, I probably would find reasons to put it off. But I put in for that paper, so I was on the docket to present some kind of
stress is a powerful motivator.
Some kind of a paper. So I dove into that research, and it got longer and longer and longer and longer. It actually went beyond a paper and became a small book, and we called it The Search for Sodom and Gomorrah. But it was just basically my exegesis of the biblical text and what the text said, and it was very clear that Sodom was north and east of the Dead Sea. In fact, it was very clear that it was the largest, the Bible presents it as the largest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea in an area visible from Bethel and Ai.
Something worth kings coming all the way from Mesopotamia and crossing the desert, crossing through Tadmor, Damascus, coming down from the north and doing battle with these kings.
No, exactly right. And not only that, if you go back to Genesis 10, the cities of the plain are mentioned parallel, right alongside with the great cities of Mesopotamia. And so when it's talking about the extent of the Canaanites, that the Canaanites lived along the coast, and it brings us down from Sidon to Gerar, to Gaza, to Gerar, and then it jumps over to the valley. It says then from Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim to Elisha, which is Laish in the north. So it's going south to north. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was brought up in the conference just a little while ago that the Transjordan cities, from an Egyptian point of view on the Egyptian map lists, are always listed from south to north as you come from Egypt. And that's exactly the way they're listed in the book of Genesis. So we decided Sodom was the southernmost city because it's Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, so on. But it's always mentioned first in the list. Whether it's just mention Sodom, Gomorrah, or Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other cities, it's always listed first. It's the only one ever mentioned by itself.
Giving it some, indicating that it was really important.
Right. And the king of Sodom is the only one that plays in the story. He's the only one that has a voice. Mm-hmm. So it seemed that was a reasonable assessment that Sodom was big. It was the biggest one of those cities anyway. So if you could find the biggest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea in the immediate vicinity of the southern Jordan Valley, you probably have Sodom.
Just to give viewers a sense of how important it is, because in the biblical narrative, we would assume Jericho plays a much bigger role because that's where Joshua focuses his efforts when they first cross the river. But in the time of Abraham, how big was Sodom, Tal El Hammam, compared to Jericho and, say, Jerusalem?
Well, you could probably put 7 or 8 Jerusalems, maybe 10 of them, inside the fortifications at Tal El Hammam.
That much bigger.
And we used to think that you could fit that many Jerichos in there too. We now know that Jericho has a lower city. So it may be much bigger than everybody used to think it was in the Middle Bronze Age in the time of Abraham. But it's still, Tal Hammam is much larger than Jericho. Mm-hmm. So it's the biggest city. In fact, we now know it as the largest continuously occupied. Not largest city, but largest continuously occupied Bronze Age city in the entire southern Levant. Now there's only one, in southern Levant, there's only really one city, maybe two, that got bigger. Ashkelon on the coast and Hatzor in the upper Galilee. So, but we always say, we have more satellites. They crammed all their people into two big towns, into the big towns, but we have dozens of satellites around us. We have guardian cities around us, plus the other cities of the plain, all in a very tight, within a 6-7 kilometer radius of a center. So it's pretty packed in with sites.
Well, that is just mind-blowing.
I was in the room. I was actually running the camera while you were talking to Dr. Collins, and it was all I could do not to just shout sometimes, because the things that he was telling us were, first of all, they're really new. The Lord is opening up new chapters in history to us. He is verifying accounts. He's unsealing books.
Yes. And to think that that site, which was so much larger than Jericho or Jerusalem, the largest city in the southern Levant south of Hatzor, which is north of the Sea of Galilee, went untouched for so many years because people assumed, no, that's just too big. It can't be one of those biblical sites.
Oh, I know. And yet, I've read some 19th century accounts of going through that region, Josiah Porter and the other one.
Claude Conder.
Claude Conder, thank you very much. Plus, Sir Charles Warren was in the area, and he referred to other mountains that were sacred. It just looks like a natural hill, but it is not a natural hill. And praise the Lord that Dr. Collins asked the question.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Why are we not looking there when we're at Bethel, which is where Abraham and Lot were, and
Yes.
Lot looked up, which in the parlance of the ancient Near East meant he looked to the east.
Yes.
He didn't look southeast. You can't see the sites that have traditionally been identified as Sodom from Bethel, but you can see the plains, the well-watered plain between Jericho and Sodom.
Yes.
Just amazing stuff.
So we need part two.
Yes, yes. Think about how exciting it is that we're living in a time where this information is now coming to light. I mean, just going back over our last few months on Sci Friday and the interviews with Scott Stripling about the discovery, perhaps, of the site of the tabernacle at Shiloh,
I know.
the curse tablet from Mount Ebal, the new curse inscription deciphered from the site of Jerusalem, and then this at, well, of course, the discovery of Joshua's altar,
I know.
but then the discovery of ancient Sodom. The Bible is a history book, not predominantly, but because we can trust the history that's in the Bible, we can trust the prophecies and we can trust the promise of eternal life from our Lord and Savior, Jesus
Amen.
Christ. Thank you for watching. From Albuquerque, New Mexico, this is Sci Friday.
Sci Friday is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at scifriday.tv and gilberthouse.org. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.